And also more good news, the computer upgraded my office computer to a laptop, which I now have at home. So I believe this computer probably has better components, which hopefully will eliminate some of the lagging that was happening in the recordings before. So hopefully I've got enough RAM in this computer to stream the lecture and record it at the same time without slowing the computer down and causing lagging. So the quality of the recordings this semester hopefully will be better. All right, the quiz questions. Those are both for credit and for practice. And so the quiz questions are my effort to help you prepare for the following class. So the first quiz questions aren't due for a little while, but the quiz questions are generally due, as most of you know, before we lecture on that content. So there's no quiz questions due for the day 1 content, but the first set of quiz questions are due for the day 2 content. So if you scroll down on the syllabus, we'll come back up and look at the rest of that in a second. Today is day 0, Monday is day 1, and Wednesday of next week is day 2. So the first set of quiz questions you have to answer before next Wednesday at 1 p.m. And they'll cover some of the day 1 content and some of the day 2 content. So to get access to the quizzes, some of you have already started doing this, but what you would want to do is to get the link for the quiz master document. So if you click on this link, it should take you here to the master document. So only one person in your group needs to do this, but once they do and follow these instructions and make a copy of this document, which includes all of the quiz questions, then they would just click on the share button and type in the email addresses for the other people in your group. And make sure you put my Gmail address in there as well. Make sure it's profjamesbio@gmail.com. That way, your group can collaborate to work on those quiz questions. You can have different students working on different questions. You can all work on all the questions, however you want to do it. You want to get those questions answered before the day that we lecture on them. So the day 2 quiz questions are due before lecture on day 2, which is next Wednesday. If you can work on those a little early, you can get feedback on your answers before they're due and before I grade them for points. So I highly recommend that you get those Google Docs going sooner rather than later and start working on that sooner rather than later, even though you have almost a week before it's due. If you're able to do that in the next couple days, then I would be able to notice that in your Google document and give you some feedback, and then you can potentially refine your answers before they end up being graded. So that can really help your quiz grade, and really also helps to get you a good mindset going into the lecture, so you're kind of familiar with some of the lecture topics. The lecture itself will be more meaningful for you if you've reviewed those things. And then those questions are also meant to be similar in style to the types of questions on the exam, so that it's just extra practice and that you'll get feedback on before we have the exams. So that's another important area where you'll be practicing, getting feedback on your practice, making adjustments, learning from that, and then continuing more practice. For the most part, students have given me good feedback on the Mechanisms app, so we're going to continue to use that. So if you haven't yet downloaded the Mechanism app, this probably works best on your phone. But if you just type alchemy or mechanisms, this is a picture, the type of picture that you'll see. That's the correct app. That's the app you want to download, and then you'll have to purchase access to the app. I believe it's still $10. And when you purchase that, you'll need to use our course code to get into our course and get to the assignment center in there. And that's to it's meant to help you practice working with mechanisms. So as many of you know, a lot of the exam questions require you to draw a mechanism, to use these curved arrows to show the movement of the electrons for a reaction. And since mostly we're going to be covering new reactions for the semester, we're going to be working with a lot of mechanisms and asking you to draw a lot of mechanisms. So the more practice you can get with that, it's a very visual thing. The bonds are breaking and forming, atoms are moving away from somewhere and forming new bonds somewhere else. So the mechanism app helps you with the visual component of that. So just to point out the details about that, if you scroll down on the syllabus to the section about the mechanism app, the points associated with that are 7% of your grade. So it shows you where to get the app. And this right here is the course code. So you need that to get to the assignments and to get credit for doing those assignments and to earn the points for your grade. If you're in the class last semester and you already downloaded the app, you don't need to re-download it. You shouldn't have to purchase anything else, but you do need to put in the new course code for you to get the points for this semester. So it shouldn't cost you anything additional once you've paid it for the app the first time around. But you want to get on that relatively soon because I believe the first set of assignments due for that are coming up. I can double check that just to let you all know. So the first one is due in less than a week. And there's a bunch of mechanisms in here to get through. So a lot of this is review from stuff we did last semester, but it's really helpful to see the electron movement and work through that. And you know, all you have to do is get through it to earn the points. You know, so if you get stuck in one of these and you can't finish it, feel free to message me. I can help you with it, and we can work on that together, and I can help get you through it so you can get the points. So that's also a grade booster. You know, all you have to do is get through those assignments in time and earn the points. If something happens in your life and things, you know, you get behind schedule-wise and you miss one of the due dates there, I'm happy to extend those. It's for a little while so you can earn the points for them as well. So try to keep on pace with that because that practice is going to help you with the exams. You don't want to get behind. You know, if you're doing the practice after you've already answered the exam questions on that content, it's not going to be as helpful. But I'd rather have the chance to do it and earn the points than not do it at all. So I'm happy to extend the due dates on those where necessary. And then the practice exams, also a little extra practice. As usual, those are on Canvas. So you can look at those documents here. Each practice exam has an answer key with an explanation for how I would answer those questions if it were me. And so, you know, if you download the first couple there, oops. Also, the practice exam is, oh, this isn't the answer key, this is just the practice exam. I shouldn't say answer key here, I'll have to update that. But they are labeled so you know which questions are helping you practice for which exams. You know, so the first 5 questions here are helpful for exam 1, first 6 questions actually, and then the next questions are going to be more relevant to what you're going to see on exam 2. And then the answer keys explain those. And so, yeah, if you're working on that and your answers don't match with what's in the answer key and you're not sure why, you want explanation or help with that, just message me and I can help you with that. So there's a lot of practice. Not many students will have time to do all of it, but the more of it you have time to do, the more prepared you'll be for the exams I mean, that's the main area where you're earning points. So that's, it's going to be your main focus. Obviously, the quiz and mechanism are also worth points. The practice exams and the textbook practice is not worth points. So you probably want to also prioritize the quizzes and the mechanisms because you're earning points with those. But all that practice is definitely helpful if you have time to fit it into your schedule. As I was saying, I highly encourage you to ask me questions when you have them. I do try to get back to students as quickly as possible when students contact me. So even if it's a last minute thing, I'll still try to answer your questions as much as I can. But the more you can work ahead, the more prepared you'll be because you'll be able to get a lot more feedback from me in a timely manner. The tutoring center may or may not have someone qualified to help you this semester with OChem 2. But I was talking with Jay recently, and he told me that Discord has some servers where there are tutors to help people with chemistry problems specifically. So if you go to this link here, there are some servers. Some I think specifically are for OChem. And Jay did tell me to give you a disclaimer that some of the people on there are not always like politically correct or appropriate. So you may come across some offensive things on there potentially. But my impression was that most of the people on there just like chemistry and they want to help people with chemistry and explain stuff. So I believe that's potentially most of those servers are free tutoring access. So that's also a potential resource that you might want to think about accessing. But it's important to get feedback and to get help when things aren't making sense. So that's the key point there. In terms of another key to success, it's really pretty important to try to avoid falling behind. And that means every day or at least every other day, putting at least a few hours in to get through the practice that I'm suggesting, to ask for help whenever you need it. And then the study guide is the other big one. So some of you have started to really effectively use the study guide last semester, and you notice that when you're able to really think thoroughly about each bullet point on the study guide, then the exam questions are usually not surprising, right? So take a look at the study guide here so we can explain that. So for the first exam, which is going to cover day 1 and day 2 content, here are the study guide sections for that. So the study guide has some terminology that you should be familiar enough with, where if you see the term used in a question on an exam, you have some idea of what that question is asking. You'll be familiar with that terminology. And then there are some bullet points, right? So for the day 1, here are the key bullet points. Those were also in the skills review I showed on Canvas. They're also on the PowerPoint slides we use in lecture. But the bullet points are what I use to write exam questions. So I might ask a question about the thermodynamics of the halogenation reaction using chlorine, bromine, or iodine. I might ask you to describe the difference, right? So if I ask you a question about that, how are you going to be prepared? Well, you want to look for practice on that concept or topic, right? So the idea with the study guide is, if you really want to be sure that you're prepared for each weekly exam, as you're practicing in the textbook and practicing by answering the quiz questions and looking at the mechanisms app, you want to be kind of checking these off. If you work through a problem that you feel has tested your ability and you have mastered that, check it off and then go to the next one. So that way, if you don't, when the exam comes up, you'll have practiced all these bullet points that are going to be potentially on exam 1. And keep in mind here, exam 1 is also going to cover day 2. So these bullet points for the day 2 content are also something you want to be familiar enough with where you could answer an exam question that I might write based on that bullet point. So you won't necessarily know which bullet points I use to write the questions, but there's only, a handful of bullet points from each day's content. So if you practice enough on each bullet point, you should be well prepared for the exams. And that way there won't be any exam questions that are a big surprise to you. So that's the main point with the study guide, and that's how I encourage you to use it. Any questions about any of that stuff? All right, so as we said, it's a continuation of Vochem 1, same textbook. Here's a schedule. You'll notice that obviously today we're not covering any content, and these dates should appear on Mondays and Wednesdays when we're having our streaming lectures. On March 8th, there's going to be a review that should occur just prior to one of the exams. We won't cover any new material that day. We have a spring break, a full week where there's no lecture and also no lab, which is nice. Nice little break there in the middle of the semester. Then as we approach the end of the semester, the last day will be a review day before the final week. And then the final week of classes will be reviewing for the comprehensive exam, and you'll have the opportunity to earn bonus points by answering the review questions the same as we did last semester. And then we'll be taking the comprehensive final exam during your scheduled lab periods in the finals week of the semester. So there are 15 weeks in the semester. The 16th week is finals, and that's when we'll have our comprehensive final exam. So this May 5th and 3rd, that's the 15th week, and then the week after that will be your final exam. So here's the lab schedule. This also shows you which weeks or days your exams are going to be occurring. And so we started Lab 1 yesterday. We're going to continue working on that tomorrow. And then next week on Tuesday and Thursday, we'll finish up Lab 1. So if you haven't had a chance to interact with your lab group on the Discord chats yet, if you look there, you'll probably see some communication already from the Tuesday lab students, and they'll be describing what they did and what they thought about. And I'll be monitoring those Discord channels, so when you have ideas that aren't reasonable, I'll try to come in and correct you and steer you in the right direction. But you can also contact me anytime with any issues you have about lab or questions, and we can meet individually if necessary to help you with the lab details. But that's the schedule. You'll see there are going to be 13 total exams, again, just like last semester, one almost every week. And then during the finals week, we'll take the comprehensive final exam, which will also be the same as last semester. Won't be the same exam, but it'll be the same type of format, multiple choice type format, same format as last semester. Let's see. And most of that's relatively straightforward. Here's the grade breakdown. I will be, just like last semester, dropping your 2 lowest exam scores. So there are 13 exams. If you have to miss for whatever reason and you get a 0, even if it's because you're sick or even if you have COVID and you can't come in or whatever, if you only miss 2 exams, then you only have 2 zeros, and those will both be dropped from your grade. Anyone have any questions? Okay, even if you are able to attend every week and you don't miss any exams, I'll still drop your two lowest exam scores. So that really helped a lot of students at the end of last semester. Lab is 20% of your grade. And then, here are the descriptions on the details there. So I think it's fair to probably leave most of that up to you to read that through and let me know if you have any questions. One change that I am making regarding the exams that we have in lab starting the week after next. Not a major change, but we're still going to have you can still use the formula sheets. And actually this semester, there are two formula sheets. There is the formula sheet from OChem 1 and now a new formula sheet for OChem 2. I recommend you print both of them. So you're allowed to bring both of them to all the exams and use both of those during the exams. If you look at the formula sheet, it's just a bunch of, I didn't open one up, but bunch of definitions and terminology, and then some information about structures and NMR and IR and naming and that type of stuff. So it's just there so you don't have to memorize stuff. So if you print those out and bring them with you to the exams, then you can access them when you're answering the exam questions. That may or may not be helpful depending on the exam question. So you definitely want to print those and bring them with you for all the exams. You can bring a periodic table. But what we're going to do this semester that's a little bit different is once we're ready to start the exam, I'm going to have everyone bring their cell phone to the front table. So that way, there's no risk of anyone's phone going off during the exam or anyone looking at their phone during the exam, which would potentially look like you're cheating or something like that. So we want to avoid any possibility of that at all. So we'll just have everyone line up their phone on the front table. I won't touch your phones. I won't breathe on them or anything. And then I'll project the exam up on the screen. You'll work out your answer on paper. And just like last semester, when you're done answering the exam, you'll bring your paper up and you'll show me your answers. I'll just give them a quick visual scan. And then you'll grab your phone and use that to take a picture of your work and then either email that to me as an email attachment or upload it to a Google Doc, which you would share with me. And then I would be able to grade your work and give you some feedback on your answers. So hopefully you would also have that as a learning experience so that if you have similar questions in the future, you'll learn from my feedback and not make the same types of mistakes. And pretty much covers the main course syllabus. Any questions about that? All right, well, let's talk quickly about the lab syllabus then. So here's the lab schedule repeated. And the biggest thing about lab is safety. So we want to be COVID safe as much as we possibly can, and we want to keep ourselves safe from any unnecessary exposure to chemicals. So again, these are basically the same rules on the other syllabus, but I wanted to put them there again to really emphasize how important it is to follow these steps when you come in, right? So make sure that you try to distance as much as possible throughout the time you're in lab, even if you're in lab with another person in your lab group and you're collaborating, you're working in the same hood. It's nice that the hoods are there because the ventilation can pull the air out of the room and prevent viral particles from building up in the air, but we still want you to be distancing as much as possible. We don't want anyone transmitting COVID while in the lab. And so we want to follow these guidelines to the letter whenever possible. And that also means wiping down your lab space when you leave and making sure that you wash your hands before you leave the lab. And especially if you're going to go into the hallway and have some food or drink or something like that, or use the restroom, obviously it's good hygiene to be washing your hands in those situations anyway, especially with the chemicals that we might have in OChem. Right? In OChem, we've got a lot of chemicals that you definitely would not want to ingest, and a lot of chemicals that you also don't want to breathe, and that you definitely don't want too much exposure on your skin. So gloves, working in the hood, whenever you've got a liquid substance that might be evaporating to produce a vapor that you could potentially breathe in, you want to be working with that in the hood as much as possible. And you want to get some good goggles. And Sarah makes a great point there. When you're wearing a mask on your face and you've got this moist air coming out of your mouth, that can easily fog up your glasses. So you'll want to probably get yourself a mask that form-fits around your nose and cheeks. That way there isn't a lot of condensation coming up into your glasses and fogging up your safety glasses. But whenever there are chemicals out, you'll definitely need to have eye protection. So some eyewear that has side shields to protect your eyes from any kind of chemical exposure. If there were some spill or splash where the chemicals got into your eyes, you'd want them protected by goggles. So I recommend that you test out your goggle face mask combination to make sure it doesn't fog up too much for you. You're also welcome to bring a face shield instead of goggles. You still need a mask for your mouth and nose, but instead of goggles or safety glasses, you can have a face shield if you prefer. That would probably be a little bit less likely to fog up if fogging is an issue for you. I want to try to keep the hoods a little bit more clean this semester if we can. So there are a lot of experiments where you'll be working on something and you'll leave it in there for the next group of students to come in and pick up where you left off. And so you might have to start a reaction. And then a couple of days later, the other person in your lab group comes in and continues to try to isolate the product of that reaction. So inevitably, there will be materials and chemicals that end up being stored in the hood. But we'll try to keep that a little bit more tidy if possible. So try to keep your space organized. You'll notice in the lab that the hoods are labeled with the lab group names. And this semester, we didn't have enough students to put any students in the Sanger group or in the Fisher group. So if you're in a lab and there's another person in your group there at the same time, they probably should be working in a different hood. Unless you're collaborating to set up one reaction in one hood, if you're testing something or you're doing different activities, you can always overflow into either the Sanger hood or the Fisher hood if you need to, but we want to try to keep those spaces clean in between labs whenever we can. I've put everyone in a lab group, so I don't have to worry about lab group formation at this point. In terms of lab attendance, obviously we're having, starting in a couple weeks, we're having exams at the beginning of lab. So if you miss the exam, that's going to be a 0. I will drop your 2 lowest grades, so I'll drop that 0. As long as you don't miss more than 2 times, that won't be an issue. But you'll also be missing the lab experience. So you've got to either take on a major role in writing the lab report, or at the very least, if you miss lab, you want to make up for it by being especially active in editing the report and active in contributing ideas in your Discord chat for how to carry out the experiment and do analysis and everything like that. So as long as you're active and engaged and collaborating by planning the experiments, by discussing everything in your Discord chat, and by being present in the lab, and if you do miss a lab, and so you can't actually carry out the experimentation. You make up for it by being extra active in planning and extra active in contributing to writing and editing the lab report. Then everyone in your group will get the same grade on that lab report. And so that's going to work out the same way it did last semester, where after your group finishes collecting all the data you need, you've got a week to write the rough draft. Now, last semester, there's some students who really procrastinated on their lab report writing, and that made it very difficult for them to do all of that writing at the end of the semester. So I would recommend doing that sooner rather than later this time around. Try to learn from that mistake a little bit, and if you can get those lab report rough drafts ready for me to look at within a week or two of collecting the data, then I can give you really nice, thorough comments, and you'll have time after that to address my edits and comments before submitting the final draft. So when you're writing the lab reports, also I wanted to mention, every lab group should keep their own lab notebook. That could be a digital notebook, it could be a Google document, or it could be an actual notebook with paper, whatever, it doesn't matter. But the important thing there is, if you've got 4 people or 5 people in your lab group, and one person runs an experiment, and then maybe they forgot to report the data to you, or maybe they reported it to you and you didn't write it down or keep track of it, and if they drop the class, you don't have that data to write the lab report. And that does happen occasionally. It's unfortunate. Sometimes students have to repeat experiments because of that. So try to be as diligent as you possibly can to communicate frequently with the other people in your lab group, and just make sure you're sharing all of your lab data so that everyone has all the data. That way, even if everyone else in your group dropped except for you, you'd still be able to write the lab report. Now, since we've got on Thursdays, we've got a group of students coming in at 1 p.m. and then another group of students coming in at 5:30 p.m., the Thursday 1 p.m. students are going to need to be especially diligent in communicating what happened during lab, right? Because you're going to have some group members who come in Thursday evenings, and they're going to need to know what you did Thursday at 1 p.m. so they can know where to pick up from where you left off and what to do with the materials that you leave in the hood behind for them. So in order to collaborate between students in the same group that are coming in at different times on the same day, it's really important to effectively communicate about what happened. What did you do in lab, sharing the data you collected, giving the next group of students a heads up on what they probably should be doing, and communicating and discussing that, and asking me for help with that whenever you need it is important, especially this semester. So the lab report guidelines are basically the same. So I'm looking for you to include these sections in your lab report and answer these questions and describe things according to these guidelines, so you can read through there. Just make sure, this numbering got a little messed up here. So after the conclusion section, the contribution section, make sure you write something there. Right, so this is where you're telling me what you contributed. You're summarizing how you contributed to planning out the experiment, what you actually did physically in lab to help carry out experiments, and what contributions you made to writing the lab report and editing it after I commented on it as well. So you want to be thorough there, but you don't have to write a whole bunch, so a summary of the main ways where you contributed is the important thing there. If you don't write that, you won't get credit. If you write a bunch of stuff that isn't correct, if you claim to have contributed in ways you didn't, I'll know because I'll be able to look at the history of your Google document and the history of your Discord chat, and I'll know whether or not you actually contributed to those things. And obviously, I'll know what you did in person in lab because I'll have been there. So make sure you actually contribute so that you can actually and accurately describe those contributions, and everyone will get credit for writing the lab report, and everyone will work happily together and come up with a good grade. And that's most of what I wanted to mention. Any questions about anything at all? No one has any questions about anything? All right, well then I'll let you all go and meet you back here on Monday at 1 for the day 1 lecture. Feel free to contact me anytime in the meantime if you have any questions about anything.